They say that Adebanjo firstborns don't live to see 30. Adeolu doesn't believe in curses, but his family does. And the thing about curses, they don't care that you are a billionaire. There are many ridiculous things Adeolu had heard in his almost 30 years on earth, but none came close to the ridiculousness that is his family curse. It was the 21st century. No, scratch that. It was 2025, not 2005. And yet, his family still believed in such a thing as generational curses. Generational wealth, now that he believed in, because it was feasible. It was something built with intentionality, not something as stupid as a generational curse that has no basis except on superstition. What was even funnier than the curse itself is the story of how the curse was born. It was definitely something out of a fairy tale, or, more accurately, a woman-scorned kind of story. One of his ancestors had broken a woman's heart, had promised to marry her, coerced her into sleeping with him, therefore taking her virginity, and then he had dumped her and married someone else. Furious, this woman had turned to the witches of the village for revenge. They empathized with her, welcomed her into their coven, and placed a curse on every firstborn son of the family to die on his 30th birthday unless he gets married to a virgin and consummates the marriage before his birthday. If that wasn't the stupidest thing he had ever heard, then he didn't know what was. The story didn't even make any sense. But what choice did he have when it came to his family? The family that had given him everything. His name, his fortune, his legacy. Of course he had to satisfy them, and that was exactly why he was now standing in front of his mirror in his penthouse bedroom, slipping on his Rolex watch with the same precision he used to dismantle competitors, just as the sun was setting over the city of Lagos, opening the way for the shadows to take over. He was getting dressed for a family meeting in Ibadan, his hometown. He had been postponing this meeting for a long time, but now, with his 30th birthday fast approaching, he could no longer delay his family summons. They believed in this curse so much that they were worried for him, especially his mother, Adetiti Adebanjo. The woman, despite being married into one of the wealthiest Yoruba families in the country, was the direct opposite of a socialite billionaire wife you'd expect her to be. Resigning from her job as a banker when she married his father, Otunba Adeolu Adebanjo Sna. To raise her children, she was a stern homemaker and took no nonsense from anyone. Not her children, and especially not her husband. She might have gone the traditional route of quitting her job to care for her family, but she was certainly no pushover. But that woman, his mother, who had raised him with a firm hand, whom he had never seen shed a tear or show any vulnerable moment of weakness, had called him crying over the phone, begging him to stop being stubborn because she couldn't afford to lose him or any of her children. That was the last straw that broke the back of his resistance. Hearing his mother, the great Adetiti, cry was a bit too much. At 29, he had everything. Wealth, power, control, except over his life and whom he chooses to spend the rest of his life with. So finally, he had decided to honor his family's call. But this time, he wouldn't be going alone. He'd finally give them what they wanted. The Adebanjo family estate sat deep in Ibadan, where red earth met stone walls and secrets clung like dust. Adeolu hadn't set foot there in years. He hadn't started out intentionally avoiding his family home. First, he had been out of the country for his MBA, and then, when he returned at 25 to take over the family business, the badgering for him to settle down and find a virgin wife had begun. So he had kept his distance, hoping that someday they would all come to their senses and stop pondering to stupid tradition that had no real basis, except maybe in misogyny and superstition. But hope was lost of that ever happening when his father's younger brother, a Catholic priest, also called him to hasten him towards marriage. He arrived to find the elders waiting in the large sitting room. His mother was also there, along with his aunties, and he knew if he didn't give them what they wanted, the women would try to use emotional blackmail on him. He'd seen them do it before to a cousin of his. It was a tactic all the elders in the family used when they wanted to coerce you into doing something. The men would sit you down and speak to you reasonably, and if you didn't listen, the women would be used to appeal to your emotions. His mother had never participated in such things because she found it sexist, but seeing her today, sat in the midst of the women, in her simple yet elegant royal blue iro and buba, he knew she was fully in on the game. He looked to his father, the current head of the Adebanjo family, and the stern look in his eyes told him he would find no help there. He rolled his eyes stealthily. Luckily for him, he wasn't there to fight them. He was done doing that. He had a business empire to oversee, and the earlier he got this marriage business over with, the better for everyone. Eku ile, Bami, Mami, Ein Agba. He greeted his father, mother, and the rest of the elders, prostrating flatly on the ground like a proper Yoruba son. His companion followed suit, getting swiftly to her knees beside him. "Don't greet us," his father's voice boomed, still strong and carrying the authority of his youth, like he wasn't a 73-year-old man. "Don't you know that when a child tries cutting down a tree in the forest, only an elder knows which direction it will fall?" Otumba asked him. "Oh, please ask him, and let him answer." Matthew, his father's immediate younger brother, and the Catholic priest added. "You children of nowadays think you know better than your elders," another elder said. This time, it was his Auntie Sherry, his father's older sister. It was odd that Auntie Sherry was sitting shoulder to shoulder with his mother, like they were best friends, when everyone knew they couldn't stand each other. But now that they both had an agenda, they were suddenly allies. "My elders," Adeolu began, hiding the smile as he faced the ground. Yes, he was a billionaire who controlled men, but in front of his family, he was a child, and he dared not rise until they permitted him to. "I apologize for the delay. I have finally decided to do what you have been asking of me all this while. If you would permit me to rise, then I would introduce you to my fiancée." The minute he said the word fiancée, his mother jumped off the chair and broke into a jubilant song, dancing along with it. The women joined her too. The excitement with which they danced, you would think today was his actual wedding day. Such joyous pandemonium broke out in the large sitting room, whose interior was frozen in time in the 1990s, that even Adeolu couldn't help but laugh. One of his uncles helped him to his feet, permitting him and his fiancée to rise. The women rallied around Kemi, asking her 101 questions, hugging her, praying for her, and welcoming her into the family. Eventually, they dragged her away with them to another part of the house, most likely his mother's bedroom, leaving the men alone to discuss. The family was happy. The men patted him on the back. His father smiled at him and even rose to give him a hug. Nothing made an elder happier than when their child did their bidding. Everything was going to be fine. Or at least, that was what Adeolu thought. Deep down, as Kemi was being whisked away by the excited women, happy to meet their new daughter, she knew everything was far from fine. The curse demanded a virgin, and Kemi had lost that a long time ago. But she'd had her eyes and love for Adeolu ever since the first time she met him 3 years ago. And when he had told her about his family's curse and tradition, she lied immediately that she was a virgin. Of course, Adeolu hadn't believed her, but she had come up with a story about how strict her parents were, being pastors, and how, Even till this day, due to the warnings of going to hell, she was still afraid of being intimate with any man. Adeolu had surprisingly bought her story, which was partially true. She did have strict parents growing up, but the stricter they were, the more rebellious she became, and she did the opposite of whatever they asked her to do. Adeolu didn't so much as make a move on her, except for occasional kisses on the cheeks, which had been just fine. It bought her time to keep her secret, but now that he was turning 30 in 7 days and could no longer ignore his family's demands, she knew the jig was almost up. But there was no way she would let a man like Adeolu go. She would be the next Mrs. Adebanjo, and nothing would stop that. The clock was ticking. She needed to come up with a solution fast and act immediately. She had 7 days to keep her secret or lose everything.